With fantasy trade deadlines and the playoffs inching closer, fantasy managers are wheeling and dealing. And today, we're going to take a look at two of the most traded players over the past 2 days. We're going to determine, should you be a buyer or should you be a seller based on who these players are getting moved for and the most recent utilization and efficiency data. So the first player that we've got to look at is the most traded wide receiver over the past 2 days, over 9,200 times per fantasycalc.com. And it hasn't been good. 8.8 fantasy points per game, wide receiver 58, but you likely invested a second round or third round pick into him in your fantasy draft. But I think this is probably an opportunity to buy low. Let's dive in. So the name of this wide receiver, it's Tee Higgins of the Cincinnati Bengals. And there has been a lot go wrong for Higgins to start this season. Pretty much everything that could go wrong has. And we have to start with Joe Burrow, picking up the calf injury in training camp. It's been a major limitation on the Bengals offense. Over the first 4 games, 181 yards passing. This is a guy that averaged 280 yards per game in 2022. A half of a touchdown per game. He averaged 2.2 in 2022. However, over the last 3 games, we have seen a version of Joe Burrow that looks much more like what we just talked about in 2022. He's averaging 262 yards per game with 2.7 touchdowns per game, including a complete domination of the 49ers in Week 8. And if the injury to Joe Burrow wasn't enough, Tee Higgins also picked up a cracked rib in Week 4. That limited him to a 51% route participation. In Week 6, it was at 56%. But last week, against the 49ers, we saw an 82%. This is a guy that's typically going to be around 90 to 92%. So we've really only seen Higgins on the field, healthy, for 4 games. And if we isolate to those contests, he has a 23% target share and a 45% air yard share. Those are wide receiver 1 worthy numbers based on data since 2011. Oh great, we don't want to use the small sample from this year. It is just 4 games after all. Well, this is a player that's still in their prime, and in 2021, he averaged 15.7 fantasy points per game. That was the wide receiver 12. In 2022, he averaged 13.7 fantasy points per game and was the wide receiver 20. This is a mid-range wide receiver 2 with wide receiver 1 upside, and people are trading him away like crazy. So let's take a look at some of these names people are moving for Tee Higgins. And before I dive into these, again, I got it all from fantasycalc.com. You can go over and check out all of the most recent trades. I'm only going to focus on the 1-for-1s because it makes it easier to provide examples, because you can check out all the 2-for-1s, the 3-for-1s, all of that is there for you. We'll start with wide receiver, Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper's a good wide receiver, but he's in an offense. We have no clue what's going to happen. I don't know how long PJ Walker is going to have to be in the lineup. And even when we get Deshaun Watson back, is Amari Cooper going to be worth what Tee Higgins is going to be with Joe Burrow and a pass-first offense, plus 7% drop back rate over expectation? That's number 2 in the NFL. No, I want Tee Higgins easy. Josh Downs, a player we've talked about a lot. I love Josh Downs. Think he's going to be a good player in the league. He's a good wide receiver 3, low end right now. He's not a mid-range wide receiver 2. He plays for the Colts. Gardner Minshew, not Joe Burrow. So that's an easy one. And then the final one, DeAndre Hopkins. Yeah, 3 touchdown performance, over 100 yards. First time DeAndre Hopkins has done that. It took Will Levis to unlock that for him. So some nice things with Hopkins. Nice target earner. But this isn't a team that wants to throw the ball. They still want to run. They want to control things. Levis is still a rookie. We could still see Tannehill. I absolutely want to go get Tee Higgins coming off of the DeAndre Hopkins blow-up game. Give me Tee Higgins all day. So let's talk about a few of the running backs here. And look, guys, there are a lot more. I left a lot of the names off. I looked at some of them and I thought, I can't put that on the list. No one will ever believe me. But there are weird trades happening. But the first one's Aaron Jones. I like Aaron Jones. Explosive back, efficient, but he's getting older. Packers, they want to use A.J. Dillon. He's not very good, but they want to use him. Aaron Jones could be a league winner if A.J. Dillon went down. Other than that, it's going to take something weird happening. It could happen. but I would rather go ahead and take T. Higgins. I know he's going to be on the field, and I know his range of outcomes. Give me T. Higgins. Brian Robinson, touchdown dependent back on a pass first team. I don't want Brian Robinson. Give me T. Higgins. Okay? Rachaad White. Yes, he is in an every down role. We have to respect that, but it's for the Buccaneers. There's not a ton of upside with the Buccaneers offense, and most of it's going to go to Evans and Godwin. So again, give me T. Higgins. These are the sort of deals that are all over the place out there. And at a tight end position, we've got Dalton Kincaid. I like Dalton Kincaid a lot. Talked about him on this platform last week. But I'm still taking T. Higgins over a rookie tight end. Even if Kincaid is the starter the rest of the way, even when Dawson Knox comes back. Higgins has much more upside on a points per game basis. So, guys, go out there, kick the tires on T. Higgins. But we have another player we've got to talk about. We have got another player that you won't believe some of the names that they're bringing back in trade offers. And this is a name I actually want to sell high on. So the sell high name that we've got to talk about, we're at the running back position. And this player has been red hot for the last 2 games. Week 7, 21 fantasy points, the running back 6. Week 8, 29 fantasy points was the running back 3. But when we really dig in, when we take a look at how these points are coming, we look at the role, we look at the efficiency of the player, and we go to our historical comps, there are a lot of red flags that we've got to talk about. So the player that we are discussing is Gus Edwards, running back for the Baltimore Ravens. He's a really interesting case because I actually upgraded him in the utilization report this week over at fantasylife.com because there are positives. However, when you look at all of the underlyings and then you look at the marketplace, it is one of those rare instances when you see the names he's going for, you'll know what I mean. It's time to go ahead and move him. So let's start by looking at that talent profile. And you guys know me, when we talk about running backs, one of the first things I want to look at is their ability to create explosive plays. And so I like to look at the percentage of carries that go for 10 plus yards. Not good. Not good for Edwards. 8.6%. The league average is 9.5%. Right? This is a replacement level back in that capacity. Missed tackles forced per attempt. A little over 11%. Way below the league average. The average over the last 3 years is 17%. And then, if we want to take a look at the ability to create yards after contact, he's at 2.5. That ranks 37 out of 52 qualifying backs. So this is a replacement level back, and anytime we have that, even though the coaching staff may like him, may trust him right now, there's always going to be an opportunity for someone else to take over more of your job as the year goes on. So let's take a look at the utilization. So we talked about the 2 blow-up games in the last 2 weeks for Edwards, and not surprisingly, they coincide with his 2 best rush shares of the season, 64 and 68% over the last 2 games. That equals 14 and 19 rushing attempts. So those are some nice things. Getting carries inside the 5-yard line over the last couple of games. Lamar Jackson still could be an issue, but it's a quality offense. So those are things to like about what we're getting with Gus Edwards. The challenge here is still not involved in the passing game hardly at all. Doesn't get on the field much for the 2-minute offense. We don't see him very often in long down and distances, and he's not targeted on early downs. You know, this is a guy with a 3% target share on the season. So it's a very narrow path. And we also have to realize this sample here, we're taking out week 1 with J.K. Dobbins. So when you look at the line that says sample, we could also have a back that's just going to get 50% of the rushing attempts when everything shakes out, because game script can be involved with how many carries we're seeing a certain player get. They still like Justice Hill. And more trailing game scripts and scenarios where they need to throw the ball more, we're probably going to see Justice Hill a little bit more. So good status here for Edwards, but let's break it down. Let's assume he keeps this role that he's in right now, and let's look at the comps. But then let's look at another comp group that says, no, he's probably going to level out more like what we've seen since J.K. Dobbins went down, and then we'll take a look at some of the trade options. So let's assume that Gus Edwards keeps the role that he's been in for the last 2 weeks. That's risky business, but hey, let's just have some fun with it. What does it look like? Based on data since 2011, the average finish is a running back 22. 12.7 fantasy points per game. That's not bad. That's something that you can use. But now let's step back, broaden out, assume maybe game scripts have played a little bit of a role. those sort of things, and see how he's done since J.K. Dobbins went down, also had Justice Hill miss some time in there, it comes out to a running back 34, 10.2 points per game. And I really think that's your range. One of the big challenges with this sort of profile that doesn't get work in the passing game, doesn't create the explosive plays, they are so dependent on the offense running perfectly, the game scripts working right, that there's not a lot of upside. We don't see a lot of comps in the group. In fact, there are hardly any comps in the group that are breaking into the top 6 running backs. It's very rare to see that outcome. He needs more of that passing down role. And because of that, I look at him more like Brian Robinson Jr. Everybody loved Brian Robinson Jr. after 2 games. Why? Everything was going his way. Volume dependent, game script dependent, touchdown dependent running back that had those things working for him. Since then, how much do we like Brian Robinson? That's the kind of roller coaster we're probably going to be on with Gus Edwards, which is why I want to move him for some of these names. So let's start with a few wide receivers. I've also got a tight end for you here. But Deebo Samuel, and this is just to give you a name, you wouldn't think that Gus Edwards and Deebo Samuel would be in a trade together. But it's happening. People are getting assets like this. Now, I get it. Deebo's got question marks. We've got an injury. We've got a jam-packed offense. But I still think the 49ers are a quality team, and I know the talent of Deebo is there. And when he's healthy, he's not getting replaced. Okay? We look at Christian Kirk. Similar situation. This is a good player. He's the best receiver right now on the Jaguars. They haven't even hit their full stride. Kirk's role is not going anywhere. He may have to battle for targets, but I know he's a talented player. And then the last two, Mike Evans and Deontay Johnson. Mike Evans, he can give you spike weeks as big as what Gus Edwards has been giving you, and I know he's not going to lose his job. So I would rather have that player. Baker loves throwing him the ball. Deontay Johnson, I get it. He doesn't always come through with the expected fantasy points that we want on his targets. But the guy gets open, he demands volume, he's gonna be on the field. The talent is there. And finally, Mark Andrews. I saw this name a couple of times. Are people down on Mark Andrews? I don't know what's going on with that. But if I can get a player with that sort of talent, any one of those names, any players like those names, I want to move Gus Edwards for that archetype player.